Good evening, viewers, and very welcome to yet another live webcast. You have just been watching a submission in our showcase reward program from the Netherlands and a Christmas survey that was held there this Christmas. If you are not familiar with our showcase reward program, which you can read more about on our website, then it allows you to win a free upgrade to the next version of Capture if you submit a showcase that we promote. And that's what happened here. So the designer in this case received a free upgrade to Capture 2023. Note how I am refraining from attempting to pronounce the name wrong. Tonight I'm going to be talking about visualization, quality and performance. There will also be a bit of an open Q&A, but before that I have two more news items to share with you. The first one, of course, being the not the news item I thought it would be, but we are going to Frankfurt in a couple of weeks to the Pro Light and Sound show. So if you are planning to go there, or if you're going to be near, then please drop by. We will be in Hall 12 Mark 1, stand B38. I'm sure there will be some plans and VR guides and whatnot to help you once you're there, so I'm sure you don't need to memorize the details, to be honest. So in 2 weeks, Frankfurt, and we will be showing the next news item, which is our recent release of Capture 2023. That we released almost to the day a month ago. It was in fact the day after the last webcast, which was the release webcast. It seems to have gone down pretty well. We released one bug fix update some 2.5 weeks after the first release date, and we have yet to release another one, so it seems stable and good in case anyone wonders. It's worth noting that if you own 2022 today, you can always download 2023 and try that out as a demo with all your project files in case you want to see how it behaves or if it's stable on your machine or anything like that. So let's move on to today's topic, which is going to be visualization, performance and quality. I have some keynote slides I want to walk you through. And after that, I will be taking questions. Actually, if you have questions related to visualization, performance, and quality, I'm happy to be answering them as I go. So you're welcome to file your questions in the chat somewhere around here. I guess it's probably below me. Don't sit on your questions. It takes a little bit of time for them to reach me too, so there's a bit of a delay. So as you're wondering stuff, shoot your questions. If you have questions not specifically related to the topic of today, then I will save them for later in the webcast, where if there is enough time, I'll be happy to answer general questions, basically. So let's move on to the topic of today, where let's start with defining why we are talking about this in the first place. So imagine you have a design, you've been working on it in Capture, you start turning on lights, and rather than getting nice, crisp imagery, you get something more like this. Something coarse, pixelated, maybe it's jerking around a little bit as well. And now you're wondering, what's going on here? What can I do about this? This particular image is basically a reconstruction of a real-world case some weeks ago that was discussed on the Capture user group on Facebook. It involves some strip lights, or actually quite a lot of strip lights, that are placed behind some other scenery, and under some circumstances the quality isn't quite what you would like it to be. And that's what I want to talk about. So the solution in this case is not to work with the amount of smoke or the amount of ambient lighting or anything like that, because the problem is actually more fundamental in its nature. And it's basically this lovely classic triangle of contradictions. In this situation, there's basically two things out of the three corners that you can have. You can have complexity and quality, or performance and quality, or performance and complexity, but you can't have all. You have to sacrifice one of them. So let's start with talking a little bit about each of these three corners of the triangle, starting with performance. Performance, in the case of capture at least, is generally speaking the refresh rate, the frame rate that you are getting in the visualization. That is the number of times per second that the visualization updates. This is exactly the same actually as the frame rate of a classic animation, where you've drawn a number of frames, and by shifting through them at a nice pace you get the effect of an animation. So typically you want to get up to around 24-25 frames per second in order to have a somewhat smooth appearing animation of what you are watching. Of course, if you're watching static images, then you could say it doesn't matter, but even if your lights are not moving in capture, the smoke is still animated. So even with all lights static, unless you have completely killed the variation of the smoke, you will see this jerkiness in the visualization if you don't have good performance. So we need frame rate, we need FPS, frames per second. But here's it's also worth mentioning that this is also connected to your hardware. So if you have a monitor that only updates 30 times per second, then a higher refresh rate in capture is pointless, because your monitor still only updates 30 times per second. And there are some circumstances, especially when you're connecting additional external monitors, or as in our case here today, where I'm running an HDMI out of the laptop, which is basically an external screen. Then there are situations where, for instance, the slowest monitor can cap the update rate of all monitors in the system. So it's good to know that if you have a non-standard setup, this could affect performance on screen too. Not common, but it's good to know that it can happen. Here I also want to point out that while you as a user, you want good frame rate, you might say, okay, if temporarily the frame rate goes down to 1 frame per second, I can live with that if it's just while I'm doing something else. But the truth is, then another problem kicks in. The operating system, Windows or Mac OS, is basically going to kick out any application that is too slow in its refresh rate. The mechanism behind this is often called TDR, timeout detection and recovery. And the reason it exists is because each application sends work to the video card, and the operating system has no way of knowing how long it will take for the work to finish. And until the work is finished, no other application, including the operating system itself, can draw anything on screen. So if any software suddenly decides to send 3 seconds worth of work to the video card, then this blocks all other applications in the computer. And for that reason, this mechanism exists in both Windows and Mac OS, that if an app misbehaves, it gets thrown out. So it is very important for capture to be performant, not only so that the animation appears smooth, but also to avoid any kind of situation where the operating system kicks capture out because suddenly you have 6,000 lights flashing and it took 3 seconds to render that frame. So that was performance. The next corner we will talk about is the complexity corner, and these are things that affect how long it will take Capture to draw that one frame of visualization. So we've put together a list of the top offenders in terms of performance requirement. Starting, of course, with the amount of objects in the design. If you rewind time a few years, it was perhaps more common to talk about the number of polygons in your design. This isn't really the case, at least not in Capture anymore. These days it's more about the amount of objects, regardless of whether they have 10 or 1,000 polygons each. A sort of trick to work around this is that if you have multiple objects that are actually identical but simply placed in different locations, then we can use something known as instancing. This is similar to block references in AutoCAD, or simply saying that rather than keeping a copy of the same object many times, you have a definition, and then every time it's placed somewhere, you just say, well, put that object here, but let's not copy the whole thing. Let's just do it on the fly, in a manner of speaking. So having a lot of objects, and in particular a lot of unique objects, is taxing on performance. Next, of course, is the amount and type of lights we have. So each light comes with some light to be rendered, and the larger portion of the stage that needs to be painted, the more taxing it is on performance. So lights with a narrow beam, like some lasers or beam lights, pin spots, stuff like that, they are not that expensive performance-wise. Floodlights, washes, Fresnels, these types of lights, they are the most expensive, especially if they are what we call multi-cell or multi-aperture, which means that while it's one light, you can actually see multiple lights within it. An 8 light is a very good example of that type of light. So in that case, it's actually the amount of apertures or cells that affect performance rather than the 8 light itself. So an 8 light is basically as expensive as 8 bar cans, which are obsolete these days anyway, but all right. Moving on, we have materials. So if you work a lot with PBR materials in Capture and you load a large amount of textures, this can also be taxing on performance. So keep that in mind if you're downloading PBR materials. If you think that you'll download the 8 or 16K textures to get good-looking visualization, that is going to increase the complexity and slow down, well, lower the performance or decrease the quality of the visualization. So if you have a texture that you're going to apply to an object, and that object is going to occupy a small part of the screen in the visualization, then the actual number of pixels on screen is probably roughly the resolution you need on that material. Of course, if you zoom into the object so it covers the entire screen, or zoom in even closer, then you may require higher texture resolutions. But in general, don't just go for the 8K PBR materials because they are the best. That may actually slow down the visualization and decrease the quality of the end result. Next, we have smoke boxes. By default in Capture, every design comes with one smoke box, and this follows you around, and anything you draw like a ghost, it automatically engulfs your entire design with some smoke. But you can add additional smoke boxes, and if you do that, that also strains the performance of the visualization. Similarly with reflection planes, if you use them, they are quite resource hungry. And finally, also transparent objects. They also tend to slow down performance. Not necessarily so much if you have a few of them, but if you have a lot of them, like a wall in many segments, for instance, or a large amount of scrims or anything like that, then yes, that can also affect performance. And finally, we have the quality aspect of things. And here we are talking about the resolution of the visualization. So the more pixels of visualization you want, the higher quality you are demanding. A neat trick Capture does is that even if you're rendering on a 4K full screen view, the visualization can actually be lower resolution, and then it's simply upscaled into the window. And this is why even on a 4K monitor, the visualization could appear grainy or pixelated. And that's because your physical resolution is not necessarily connected to the visualization resolution. Next, we have detail. So imagine for every pixel in the visualization, we can also choose how much information actually goes into that pixel. So a pixel itself can be computed in both fast and slower, more detailed ways. If you worked in other softwares and systems, then a term you may have seen is sample count, often used in relation to beams in smoke, where higher sample counts means better looking beams in smoke. That is a type of detail that could come into play in terms of quality. Now, resolution and detail are generally not black and white. They're not on and off. They have steps, or they are stepless, in fact. So you could go from 720p to 725p up to 1080p and have a slider for that, also for the detail. But then there are some other things, like the very methods used to compute the shadows, or how textures are filtered when viewed from steep angles, known as an anisotropic filtering. These are more on and off, so that they are not things where we can smoothly go between one or another setting. So some aspects of quality are very gradual in nature, and some aspects of quality are more on and off. So just to be a little bit less theoretic, here is an example of high quality. Here is an example of low quality. You can see the resolution is much lower in this case. So how do we tackle this? What happens? Well, the performance is tied to your hardware. So the more powerful hardware you have, the better performance we can get out of it. There's not much you can do there except change the video card. So the two things we can play with are complexity and quality. So complexity are all the things I went through before, like number of objects, the resolution of materials, and so on. You can always work on reducing that complexity, but eventually you will hit a point where you can't do much more. So here you have to make some choice between quality or performance. And I'm not quite able to do that motion with my hand. Anyway, so we have a concept in Capture called adaptive quality that tries to automatically adjust the quality based on the circumstances. This can be tweaked in a few ways, and the way to do that is to open the visualization settings. This is done from the Views category in the Design tab by pressing the Visualization Settings button down here. Then this window appears. Once you have that open, the last option, called Show Performance Information, can be used to show performance information at the top right corner of the design view. This includes the current resolution, frame rate, and quality. You can see In this particular case, there is a rather odd resolution going on. Capture is reaching 60 frames per second, and the quality is maximum at the moment. At the top of this window, there is a slider that lets you prioritize between detail or high frame rate. If you are doing a design with a lot of motion, moving beams, then you may prioritize higher frame rates. Whereas if you are doing a museum design or something of more static nature, then you may prioritize high level of detail, which is things like better looking shadows or higher quality textures. This is an example of settings that aren't exactly stepless, which is why we have 5 points, because they are controlling things that we can't really go through without turning things on and off, like I mentioned before. The next option is the adaptive quality, which can be turned on and off. What the adaptive quality does is it attempts to always reach 30 frames per second. And in order to do that, it tweaks things like resolution and quality by constantly measuring how long time the rendering takes, and trying to predict, to some extent at least, how much time the next frame will require. So a good example is you might go from a look with a single beam, which can be rendered at very high quality, to a look with hundreds of beams where the quality needs to be instantly reduced in order to not take 3 seconds to render the next frame. Now, if 30 frames per second have been reached and the quality is at full, then capture will go all the way up to 60 frames per second, so as long as it doesn't lead to a sacrifice in quality. Caveats. This can fail. The way adaptive quality works is by timing things on the video card. So it relies on the timing mechanism of the video card working well. We have seen some manufacturers and drivers not doing this very well. Fortunately, these are being phased out of the market, and that problem is reducing drastically. We are looking at you, Intel, in Mac. Anyway. Also, if you're running other apps in the computer that are resource hungry, this can skew the measurements. And finally, another example is like this case here, where we're basically rendering 2 screens through some internal image, monitor mirroring functionality in Mac OS. This can also affect timing. So in non-standard hardware setups, you may have to disable the adaptive quality. If you do that, what happens is capture will run at 100% quality, and you are in control of the resolution. Just keep in mind that if you put the resolution up too high, like if you go to ultra and your design isn't basic, then this may lead to capture being thrown out by the operating system because the frames took too long to render. And that's why we show a passive-aggressive warning if you disable adaptive quality, and encourage you to send us feedback about your setup, your project file, and so on, so that we can improve the adaptive quality mechanism. Now I can see I have a question already. And if you have questions, then please do send them over. I am more or less at the end of my presentation here, so if you have any capture questions, feel free to send those as well. Alfonso is asking and writing, due to resolution and quality, I have nothing to discuss. The performance that Capture gives me so far is brutal. Much better than other programs I use, so I'm very happy with the work tool. Well, thank you so much, Alfonso. It's the nature of things that however performant we can make Capture, this pushes the boundaries of how complex your designs can be, and someone always makes use of that and instantly draws a design that again has pushed capture over the edge. So on our side, it's a relentless pursuit of constantly pushing the boundaries further and further and further, and seeing what amazing things you can do with that and what new limits you find in capture thanks to that. Yes, so this is where we got to the Q&A part. Stevery is asking, where am I going to get one of those fancy capture stickers from? So yes, you're right. I have a fancy capture sticker on my laptop here, which is not interacting very nice with our green screen, but that's just the way life is. If you are planning to come to the Pro Light and Sound show in Frankfurt in a couple of weeks, you could actually manage to get away from that show with 1 or 2 stickers. I think we also have them on a white background. We have been asked why we don't do more swag, like giveaways with capture merchandise, basically. It's not so much, or actually we've been asked why we don't sell swag, to be honest. So that has been the main question. People have been asking to buy things like hoodies and sweaters from us. The truth is we are manufacturing software today, which counts as a digital service. That means that we don't need to keep inventory, for instance, and that VAT and trade and shipping rules are, well, let's say very different from that of selling and shipping goods. So if we are to start actually selling and shipping goods, then we would need to set up inventory, work with completely new VAT rules and lots of boring practicalities. So we're hoping to find maybe a partner in this, an external company that could take care of it, but yeah, we haven't gotten there yet. So it's not that we oppose it, but yeah, there are practical reasons why we are sticking to software at the moment and just occasionally do some cheap stickers and stuff like that. Andre Petrus is asking, when will Capture have a dongle option for licensing? I'm not going to say never, but we have no plans whatsoever for it at the moment. Again, as I mentioned, if we start selling and shipping physical items, it's a whole other ball game that we are not set up for at all at the moment. And we're not very keen on it because it is a lot of work. Having said that, we are looking at finding other software-based ways of achieving the things you can achieve with a dongle. Things like moving between computers more efficiently or reselling licenses and stuff like that. So we are hoping to solve your problems, just maybe not with an actual hardware dongle, would be the takeaway from that. All right, let's see if we have any more questions. Otherwise, we might have reached the end of today's webcast. Yes, we have a comment from Alfonso. He says, where we have to improve is in reports, the way we create groups, the consumption of each device, as well as the weight. That is where we have to improve. Yeah, we have lots of places we need to improve, to be honest. Paperwork is a strong focus for us. I mean, we like to say that Capture is a design, documentation, and visualization software. And that documentation part there is quite important to us. In 2023, we invested a lot of time in the direct PDF export of reports. It might seem like a small thing, but the truth is we had to do a lot of stuff with font handling, text layout, and things that were, in a sense, given for us for free by using HTML and web technology before. And we're now progressing with reports and going to move to things like embedding reports in plots and doing more with the direct PDF export, now that we have better technology to stand on. But anyway, we've reached the end of tonight's webcast. We are hoping to keep feeding you with a steady flow of webcast where we can take questions like this because it's a great way of meeting virtually. I'll squeeze in a bonus question. Vincent de la Rosa is asking, is there any way to do projection mapping in Capture 2023? Projection mapping is a big topic. We can do some things in 2023, but we would need to get more specific. So maybe we'll do a dedicated webcast on projection mapping specific stuff. Right, if you keep asking, I'll keep going. Justin Schwartz is asking, any plan to allow for custom materials to be applied to fixtures? For example, client presentations and the ability to create white bodies on fixtures. There are maybe some plans, and they are partially in conflict with other plans of getting better 3D models from fixture manufacturers. So I'm sure you are aware of GDTF, where a group of manufacturers are trying to set up a sort of standard for libraries in general. And a part of that is the 3D models of the fixtures. Unfortunately, if that gets more traction, which it seems to be getting, that actually makes it harder for you to customize fixture colors. So if we have received a 3D model from a fixture manufacturer with materials that include things like the logo of the company on the side of the yoke and stuff like that, that's probably going to be embedded in a texture. And at that point, it gets hard to change the base color of the fixture. So there are issues we're battling with related to that. I mean, we've done it with trusses, where you can drag any material and apply it to a truss to customize it. But you're not expecting to have 3D models with textures from truss manufacturers, so it's much easier to get away with it there. So yeah, not a very good answer. We're aware of the issue, and we hope we can do something clever at one point, basically. Right, let's cut it there. Thank you so much for watching. I hope I get to meet maybe some of you in Frankfurt in a couple of weeks. Otherwise, I intend to be back here with you in a few weeks again, or 1 or 2 weeks after Frankfurt. Thank you for watching, and see you soon again.